Have you ever noticed something strange about retirement conversations? They almost always start with the wrong question. People ask, how much do I need? What number should I hit? How far behind am I? And how much more time do I have? It sounds logical, responsible even, but it is also the question that quietly leads so many people in the wrong direction. Because once you start there, you begin chasing a number with no finish line. You hear 500,000, then 1 million, then 1.5, then 2, and suddenly enough keeps moving away from you. The finish line silently slides farther every time the market rises, every time inflation creeps, every time a talking head says you need more. And what started as planning turns into a low-grade panic that follows you into breakfast, into bed, and into every glance at your account. So today, I want to do something different. I want to show you the 6 retirement levels no one talks about, and I want you to figure out which one you are actually on. Not the level based on ego, not the level based on your neighbor, not the level based on some giant round number. The level based on how your retirement life will really feel when the paychecks stop and real life begins. Because retirement is not one big category. It is not simply ready or not ready. There are levels to this, and most people are standing on one level while judging themselves by another. That mismatch is where so much fear comes from, and here is the part that matters. A person with $300,000 can quietly be more secure than a person with 1 million. A couple with modest savings can feel calmer than someone with a giant account and no clear plan. That is not wishful thinking. That is how retirement actually works. Let me just say, if this content resonates with you, the subscribe button is right there. I never waste my viewers' time, and if retirement has been sitting in the back of your mind like a half-finished conversation, stay with me. This one may change the way you see your own future. I want you to imagine your retirement in 2 parts. Not one big number, 2 distinct piles. Pile 1 is income that shows up no matter what. And pile 2 is your savings, the money that has to be managed, spent, and protected. Most people obsess over pile 2 while barely understanding pile 1. That is the first shift. The real question is not how big is your nest egg. It is how much reliable income will hit your life every single month, and how much pressure that takes off your savings. If you miss that, you can have a large account and still feel financially naked. Because savings can be spent down. Savings can drop in a bad market. Savings can make you hesitate every time the roof leaks, the car breaks, or groceries jump again. But income, especially predictable income, changes the emotional weather of retirement. So let's walk through the levels. Not as labels to judge yourself, but as a map. Because if you know where you are, you can stop guessing. And when you stop guessing, you make better decisions. The first level is what I call the fragile level. This is the level where your retirement depends almost entirely on your own savings, and those savings are not large enough to absorb many mistakes. There is no real income floor underneath you. Every decision feels heavier than it should. At this level, retirement feels like stepping onto thin ice. You can move, but every step makes you listen for cracks. A market drop feels personal. A medical bill feels threatening, and even small pleasures can quietly turn into guilt. The second level is the hopeful level. This is where a person has some building blocks in place. Maybe Social Security will cover part of the basics. Maybe there is a small pension, or a part-time plan, or a paid-off home. But the picture is still foggy, and the confidence is not there yet. This is the level where people often say, I think I can retire, but I am not sure. And that little phrase, not sure, tells you everything. Uncertainty is expensive. It steals sleep. It makes you delay decisions. It keeps your life on pause. The third level is the patchwork level. This is where several pieces of retirement exist, but they do not fully connect. There is income, there is savings, maybe there is home equity, maybe there is a spouse's benefit, but it still feels like a quilt made of different scraps. Useful, yes, but not smooth and not settled. At this level, people often look better on paper than they feel in real life. They can tell you their account balance. They can tell you what their house is worth. But ask what their monthly life looks like after taxes, insurance, food, travel, repairs, and health costs. And suddenly, the answers get fuzzy. That fuzziness quietly erodes confidence. The fourth level is the stable level. This is where your base expenses are mostly covered by predictable income. That might be Social Security, a pension, an annuity, rental income, or some combination that keeps the lights on and the bills paid. Your savings still matter, but they are no longer carrying the entire load. That changes everything. At this level, retirement starts to feel less like a cliff and more like solid ground. You still pay attention, you still plan, but you stop treating every market headline like a fire alarm. You begin to breathe differently. Here is a question. If you had to choose between more money or more certainty, which would it be? Keep that in your head as we go. Because the answer you give yourself says a lot about the level you actually want, not just the one you think you should want, and those are often not the same thing. The fifth level is the confident level. This is where reliable income covers your essentials and a meaningful part of your wants. Your savings become a tool for flexibility, not survival. Trips, gifts, hobbies, family help, home updates, and fun stop feeling reckless. They start feeling earned. People at this level are not always rich. That is important. Sometimes they have average savings and unusually strong income planning. Sometimes they delayed Social Security. Sometimes they have a pension people overlook. Sometimes they simply know their numbers better than everyone around them. The sixth level is the free level. This is where your income floor is so strong and your expenses are so aligned with your life that money stops being the main source of daily stress. You still care about markets. You still review your plan. But your emotional energy is no longer tied to every fluctuation. This is the level many people assume only millionaires can reach. That is not true. Some millionaires never get here. Some school workers, nurses, factory employees, and clerks quietly do. Because freedom in retirement is not a number first. It is a structure first. And before you compare yourself to any of these levels too harshly, hear this. These are not levels of human worth. They are not grades. They are not judgments. They are simply descriptions of how secure your retirement life feels when it meets the real world. Let me tell you about Carol. Carol is 67. She worked for years as a school cafeteria manager in a small Ohio town. She and her husband lived in the same modest brick house for almost 30 years, and now it is paid off. Carol does not have a flashy number. Her savings sit around $212,000. That is enough to make some financial experts shrug and say, that is not enough. But Carol also has a small pension, and she claimed Social Security at her full retirement age. Her monthly life is not glamorous, but it works. The mortgage is gone. Her car is older but reliable. She cooks at home often, helps with her grandkids sometimes, and still has room for church donations, birthdays, and a weekend trip now and then. Most of all, she sleeps. Now let me tell you about Nancy. Nancy is 65. She spent her career in corporate administration, earned a good income, and lives in a nice city apartment she still rents. Her retirement account is worth about $930,000. On paper, almost everyone would call her the winner. But Nancy has no pension. She is afraid to claim Social Security too early. Her rent rises almost every year. She wants to help an adult son who still leans on her sometimes. And every time the market drops, even by a little, she quietly redoes the math in her head. So who is wealthier? That depends on what you mean. If you mean account balance, Nancy wins easily. If you mean daily peace, Carol may be miles ahead. If you mean who can make a simple plan and trust it, the answer may surprise you. And that is exactly why these retirement levels matter. One woman looks behind, according to the culture. The other looks successful according to the culture. But the culture is often measuring the wrong thing. It loves visible assets and ignores invisible income. It celebrates the pile and barely notices the paycheck. That is how people get confused. It's not about who has more saved. It's about who has more certainty. That sentence alone could save some people 10 years of anxiety. Because if you spend your retirement comparing balances instead of comparing stability, you will almost always misread your situation, and fear will fill the gap. What do you think? Are most people actually behind on retirement, or are they just measuring it wrong? Sit with that, because a lot of what you have been told about retirement is based on appearance, not structure. And appearance is a terrible guide when your future is on the line. Imagine walking onto a car lot. Every vehicle has a sticker price, bold, official, intimidating. It looks final, non-negotiable, almost like a judgment, but nobody pays the sticker. That giant retirement number people throw around works the same way. $1 million has become the sticker price of retirement. It sounds official. It sounds like the minimum. It sounds like if you do not have it, you somehow failed. But that number ignores your real life. It ignores whether your house is paid off. It ignores whether you have a pension. It ignores whether your spending is simple or high. It ignores whether you live in a low-cost town or an expensive city. And it ignores whether $2,000 of Social Security lands in your checking account every month or $4,000 does. This is where real data and perceived data start to separate. Perceived data says, large balance equals safety. Real data says, stable income, controlled expenses, and a clear withdrawal plan create safety. Those are not the same. And once you see that, you stop being hypnotized by round numbers. Think of your Social Security benefit like a faucet. Behind that faucet is a pipe, one you have been filling your entire working life. Every paycheck, every tax contribution, it all builds pressure in that pipe. One day, you decide when to turn the faucet on. Turn it on at 62, and the stream begins earlier, but it is smaller. Wait until your full retirement age, and the stream gets stronger. Wait until 70, and it gets stronger still. That does not mean later is always better. It means timing changes the shape of your retirement income. And if you wait too long to turn it on, some of that water never reaches you. It just stays in the pipe, unused, gone. No refunds, no second chances. That is why the real question is not, what is the best age according to a chart? It is, what is the best trade-off for your health, your savings, your work, and your life? The question isn't what's the best age, it's what's the best decision for your life right now. If work is wearing you down, that matters. If your family has short life expectancy, that matters. If you have a younger spouse who may outlive you, that matters. This is not a trivia question. It is a life design question. And for married couples, Social Security is not just about you. It is also about the person who may be left behind. The higher earner's benefit can become the survivor benefit. So when one spouse claims early, without thinking it through, the smaller check is not the only issue. The decision can quietly ripple forward for decades. Quick question. Have you ever felt guilty about spending money in retirement? A lot of people do, even people who can afford to spend. Because when your money sits in an account instead of arriving like a paycheck, every withdrawal can feel like damage. That feeling is more powerful than most retirement calculators admit. Think of Social Security not as an endpoint, but as a safety net, one you paid into your whole life. One that is designed to catch you when you need it most. It may not cover everything, but it changes the size of the fall. The same goes for a pension, and this is where people make a huge mental mistake. They treat a pension like background noise. It just shows up, so they stop valuing it. But a pension is not background noise. It is an income machine many people would need hundreds of thousands of dollars to recreate. If you get $2,000 a month from a pension, that matters. If you and your spouse get $4,000 a month combined from Social Security, that matters. Those checks may not look exciting on a statement. But if someone asked what size portfolio would be needed to safely create that same income, the answer would often be shockingly large. That is real value, even if it is not flashy. Think of it this way. Your income floor is like the foundation of your house, strong, underground, invisible, but holding everything up. Your savings are more like the furniture. Nice furniture matters. But if the foundation is shaky, nobody cares how beautiful the couch is. Now let's talk about something that catches people off guard. Sequence of returns risk sounds technical, but it is actually simple. It means a bad market early in retirement can hurt more than a bad market later, because you are withdrawing money while the account is falling. That combination can quietly do damage fast. Imagine trying to climb out of a hole while the dirt keeps sliding back in. That is what early losses plus withdrawals can feel like. If you retire into a bad stretch and your savings are doing all the heavy lifting, the pressure gets intense. This is another reason income matters more than people think. The more your essentials come from guaranteed sources, the less you have to sell when markets are ugly. And here is the practical side of that. A person with a large portfolio but no income floor may be more exposed than a person with a smaller portfolio and strong guaranteed income. Because the second person can often leave their investments alone during a bad stretch. The first person may have no choice but to pull from a falling account. That is not about discipline. That is about structure. Inflation is like an ice cube in the sun. It does not melt all at once. It creeps. It nudges. It slowly raises the cost of everything around you. Your groceries get a little higher. Insurance quietly climbs. Property taxes do their thing. A dinner out costs more than it used to. Home repairs are never as cheap as you hope. And healthcare almost never moves in your favor. This is why cost of living adjustments matter, but also why they are not magic. Social Security has COLA increases, and that helps. It matters. But your personal inflation may not match the official number. If your biggest spending categories rise faster, you still feel squeezed. Now listen, this is where many retirement plans quietly break. People underestimate expenses in the early years because they are thinking in categories, not in moments. They think food, housing, utilities, gas. But real retirement spending also includes replacing tires, helping family, dental work, gifts, hobbies, travel, medications, deductibles, and the strange little leaks money always finds. That is why a rough guess is not enough. Some things in life are heavy but invisible, like carrying a backpack all day. You get used to it, but it never goes away. That is what financial stress feels like in retirement when your plan is too thin. It follows you even when nothing dramatic is happening. The hidden expenses are often the hardest. A furnace goes out, a spouse needs more care, a roof leak turns into mold, one adult child has a rough year, a grandchild needs help with books or a car repair. Life does not stop asking for money just because you retired. Let me ask you something. Do you know what your monthly income will actually look like when you retire? Be honest with yourself. Not your account balance, not your dream number, your actual monthly flow after taxes and realistic expenses. Because this is where perceived readiness and real readiness part ways. A lot of people feel behind because they compare themselves to a giant savings target. But if their fixed income already covers 70 or 80% of their real life, they may be much closer than they think. And a lot of people feel secure because their statement is large, while their monthly structure is quietly fragile. That is why so many retirees report feeling better than younger people expect. Not because they stumbled into magic, not because costs vanished, but because many of them stopped measuring life by accumulation and started measuring it by sustainability. The numbers became more personal and less performative. Retirement is not a contest to see who built the biggest pile. It is a test of whether your income, expenses, and flexibility can work together for a long time. That is a very different standard. And once you understand it, the 6 levels stop feeling abstract. They start feeling practical. A lot of viewers think the levels are mostly about money. They are not. They are also about behavior. Do you know what you spend? Can you reduce pressure points? Have you planned for a spouse? Can you handle a bad market without panic? That is what moves you up. And here is something people rarely say out loud. Your ideal retirement day tells you more than your ideal retirement number. If your best day is coffee at home, a walk, lunch with a friend, and seeing your grandkids, your financial target may be very different from someone dreaming of first-class travel and 2 homes. Neither dream is wrong, but both need different math. For married couples, one of the most important conversations is also one of the most avoided. What happens if one of you is gone? Which check stays? Which one disappears? What bills remain? Who handles the money now? Avoiding that conversation does not protect your spouse. It exposes them. I have seen couples who shared a life for 40 years but never sat down and traced out the survivor reality. Then one spouse dies, and the household loses one Social Security benefit, maybe part of a pension, but not half the expenses. The grocery bill drops a little, the utility bill drops a little, but housing, taxes, repairs, insurance, and grief do not politely shrink on command. Here's something to think about. If you found out today that you're actually on track, how would that change your week? Would you breathe easier? Would you stop doom-scrolling retirement articles? Would you stop feeling like every choice has to be perfect? Sometimes clarity gives you energy before it gives you money. Let's go back to Carol and Nancy, because their daily lives show this better than any spreadsheet. Carol wakes up knowing roughly what comes in each month. The checks arrive. The essentials are covered. She uses savings carefully, but not fearfully. That difference is huge. Nancy wakes up with more money and more mental noise. She checks headlines. She delays booking the trip she wants to take. She wonders whether she should work 1 more year, then maybe 2. She is not broke, but she is not free either. Now, that does not mean Nancy is doomed. Far from it. It means Nancy may be on a lower retirement level emotionally than her account balance suggests, and Carol may be on a higher retirement level structurally than her savings suggest. This is why level matters more than image. When the market has a bad year, Carol notices, but Nancy absorbs it in her body. That is the difference between using savings for support and depending on savings for oxygen. One feels like a setback, the other feels like danger. And your retirement should not feel like danger if it can be helped. Here is something most people never ask. What amount of guaranteed income would make you feel calmer right now? Not wealthier on paper, calmer. Because once you answer that, you stop chasing random numbers and start designing a floor. That is a much smarter game. Think about this. If guaranteed income was the only thing that mattered, would you feel better or worse about where you stand? For some of you, that question is uncomfortable. Good. Uncomfortable questions often reveal useful truths. And useful truths are what move plans forward. Many people spend decades building assets without building confidence. That is because assets alone do not solve uncertainty. They can help. They matter. But if your plan depends on perfect timing, perfect markets, and perfect discipline, it is more fragile than it looks. And fragile plans create anxious retirements. This is also where spending guilt sneaks in. If you spent your whole life saving, then every withdrawal can feel like a betrayal of your younger self. You worked hard to build that account. Watching it go down can feel wrong, even when that was always the plan. That emotional friction is one of retirement's least discussed costs, but predictable income softens that friction. When money arrives without you having to sell something, retirement feels more natural. It feels closer to the rhythm of working life. Bills get paid. Choices feel less loaded. You stop asking permission from your balance every 5 minutes. So how do you move up a level from where you are now? Not by fantasizing, not by assuming, not by staring at the biggest number you can find online and hoping. You move up by getting clear on what is fixed, what is flexible, and what risks are still hiding in the corner. The first step is to calculate your real income floor. Add up every predictable source. Social Security, pension, annuity if you have one, rental income if it is truly reliable, part-time work only if you genuinely expect to do it and would not resent it. Do not guess here. Get the statements. Look up the estimated benefits. Check the start dates. Check whether a pension has survivor options. Check whether Social Security estimates change depending on claiming age. A retirement plan built on fuzzy numbers is not a plan. It is a hope. The second step is to map your real expenses, not your fantasy expenses. Start with the obvious bills, yes. But then add the leaks, home maintenance, health costs, insurance increases, family help, travel, gifts, taxes, irregular but inevitable stuff. A good retirement budget is not just a monthly list. It is a yearly reality. Some months are quiet, some are expensive. If you only plan for the quiet months, you will feel blindsided by the normal ones. That is how people end up saying, "I do not know where the money went." The third step is to pressure test your plan. What happens if markets drop early? What happens if one spouse dies? What happens if inflation runs hot for a few years? What happens if health costs rise faster than expected? If your plan falls apart under every bad scenario, it is not sturdy enough yet. That does not mean you need to eliminate every risk. You cannot. But you do want to reduce how many risks hit you at once. A strong income floor reduces sequence risk. A paid-off home reduces housing pressure. A cash reserve reduces forced selling. A survivor plan reduces chaos during the worst possible moment. The fourth step is to make your claiming decisions on purpose, not based on fear, not based on what a friend did, not based on one article. Look at your health, your spouse, your work situation, your savings, and your need for income now versus later. Then choose deliberately. For some of you, claiming at 62 will make sense. For others, waiting to full retirement age will make sense. For some, waiting until 70 will quietly strengthen the entire household, especially if you are the higher earner in a marriage. There is no universal winner. There is only a better fit. The fifth step is to define enough. And I mean really define it. Not in a vague way. What does enough cost each month? What kind of life does it support? What trade-offs are fine with you? What luxuries matter? And which ones were never truly yours anyway? Because if you do not define enough, the world will define it for you. And the world is terrible at this. It will tell you bigger is always better, more is always safer, and comparison is wisdom. None of that is true. Sometimes more only creates more moving parts. Let me ask you something personal. Have you ever avoided opening your retirement statements because you were afraid of what you'd see? You are not alone. A lot of smart, responsible people do that. Not because they are careless, but because uncertainty feels heavy. And heavy things get avoided. If that is you, start smaller. Do not begin with the total account balance. Begin with the next month. What is coming in? What has to go out? What can be changed? That one shift can take retirement planning out of the clouds and put it back on the kitchen table where it belongs. And if you are starting late, do not shut down on yourself. Seriously. A lot of people reach their late 50s or early 60s and think the story is already written. It is not. You may not be able to control the past, but you still have several levers in front of you, and some of them matter more than you think. Working one more year can help. Delaying Social Security can help. Paying off a car can help. Downsizing a home can help. Reducing one recurring expense can help. Taking a part-time job you actually enjoy can help. Small levers can quietly create major structural change. You are not behind if your retirement does not look like someone else's. You are behind only if your plan depends on assumptions you have never tested. That is a fixable problem. A lower savings number is not always fatal. A foggy plan is far more dangerous than a modest account, and this is where retirement levels become useful again. If you are at the fragile level, your goal is not to feel ashamed. Your goal is to build more floor. If you are at the hopeful level, your goal is to replace uncertainty with actual numbers. If you are at the patchwork level, your goal is to connect the pieces into one working plan. If you are at the stable level, protect what is working. Do not let lifestyle drift quietly eat your foundation. If you are at the confident level, use that confidence wisely, not carelessly. And if you are at the free level, remember that freedom is not permission to stop paying attention. It is a reward for having paid attention well. Let me ask you, have you ever calculated what your pension is actually worth in real dollars? Most people never do. They see a monthly check and move on. But that check might represent an asset value far larger than they imagine. Ignoring that is like owning land and pretending it is a flower pot. This is why two retirees can sit in the same diner, order the same breakfast, and live in completely different financial realities. One may have a big account and a weak floor. The other may have a modest account and a strong floor. One is counting dollars. The other is counting dependable dollars. Those are not the same thing. The people who feel secure in retirement usually understand one quiet truth. Predictability has value, a lot of value, not because it makes you rich, but because it lowers the temperature of your life. When the baseline is handled, your brain stops acting like every surprise is a threat. And when your brain calms down, you make better decisions. You do not panic sell. You do not hoard every dollar for a future that may never come. You do not deny yourself every joy because the market dipped 3%. You start living inside the plan instead of bracing against it. That is why retirement planning is not just math. It is emotional architecture. You are building a structure your future self has to live inside every day. If that structure is noisy, shaky, and full of exposed risk, you will feel it. If it is steady, simple, and realistic, you will feel that too. Here's a question for the married folks. Have you and your spouse ever actually talked about what happens if one of you is gone? A lot of couples avoid it because it feels dark. But not talking about it does not make it less real. It only makes the surviving spouse more vulnerable later. One spouse may assume both Social Security checks continue. They do not. One stops, one remains, usually the larger one. That alone can change a household budget fast. And if you never planned for that, the surviving spouse has to learn hard truths during grief. So if you want one of the most loving retirement moves possible, here it is. Have the awkward conversation now. Write things down now. Know where the accounts are now. Understand which income survives now. That is not morbid. That is mercy. I want to know, have you ever felt like you were doing everything right but still felt behind? You are not alone. A lot of people did save. A lot of people were responsible. A lot of people still feel uneasy. That feeling does not always mean failure. Sometimes it means the measuring stick was bad. Because if the measuring stick is just net worth, you can work hard for 40 years and still feel small. There is always someone ahead of you. There is always a higher number. There is always another article telling you your target should be bigger. That chase never ends on its own. But if the measuring stick becomes, can my income support my life? The conversation changes. Suddenly you can evaluate something real. You can improve something concrete. You can make decisions based on your life instead of someone else's fantasy benchmark, and progress becomes visible. Stop measuring yourself against everyone else. Start focusing on what truly gives you freedom. A paid-off house may give you freedom. A delayed Social Security claim may give you freedom. Lower recurring expenses may give you freedom. A pension may already be giving you freedom right now. Here's another truth people need to hear. There are retirees with less money than you who feel better than you do. Not because they know a secret trick, but because they know what their money is supposed to do. Undefined money creates anxiety. Assigned money creates direction. So which retirement level are you? Maybe you came into this thinking in dollars, and now you are thinking in structure. Good. That is the whole point. Because once you know your level, you stop asking vague questions and start solving the right problems. That is where confidence begins. If you are fragile, build the floor. If you are hopeful, remove the fog. If you are patchwork, connect the moving parts. If you are stable, protect the base. If you are confident, use flexibility wisely. If you are free, enjoy what you built without drifting into complacency. And please hear me on this. You do not need to become a financial wizard overnight. You do not need a perfect spreadsheet. You do not need $1 million portfolio to deserve peace. What you need is honesty, simplicity, and a plan that works in real weather, not just sunny weather. Think about Carol again. She did not win because she gamed the system. She won because her life and her income fit each other. That fit matters. Nancy may get there too, but only when she stops treating a big account balance as a substitute for a clear income strategy. One is a pile. The other is a plan. Think about this. There are people with millions of dollars who do not feel secure. And there are people with modest savings who sleep soundly every night. The difference is not the number. The difference is understanding your income, understanding your expenses, understanding what actually matters. That is the difference between stress and peace. That is the difference between looking rich and feeling safe. So as you think about your own retirement tonight, do not ask only, how much do I have? Ask, what level am I on? Ask, what part of my plan is solid? Ask, what part still depends on hope? Ask, what could I change in the next year that would quietly reduce pressure for the next 20? Because retirement is not just one big leap off a cliff. It is a structure made of choices: claiming age, spending habits, housing costs, survivor planning, income sources, withdrawal pressure, and every good choice strengthens the next one. You may already be closer than you think, or you may need to make some changes. Either way, clarity beats avoidance every single time. A clear, uncomfortable truth is far more useful than a comforting fog. And once you face it, you can work with it. If this gave you a new perspective, if it made you think differently, even just a little, then subscribe. The more clarity you build now, the stronger your future becomes. And if no one has told you this lately, let me say it plainly. Retirement is not won by appearances. It is won by alignment.